rack. You can put whatever you want in there. But that's supposed to be here next week.
It's exciting.
Yeah, just it's a little bit, it's about a foot and a half wider what I have, but I'm running two 32-inch monitors, and then I've got a 65-inch monitor up right up above here.
Wow.
But
Full on TV up there.
well, it is. It's a Samsung 65-inch OLED, and I'm running HDMI from my PC to it, and it's like crystal clear.
Mm, nice. I'm at some point, hopefully soon, making the transition to the standing desk with how much time we spend sitting in front of these machines and working and even sometimes playing.
Right.
Having the stand up option would be nice.
Yeah, I just got this chair. I had another chair for a while, but I just got this one, and we sit here 10 hours a day. So just giving myself some options to stand up and get the blood flowing.
Yeah, yeah, I feel that. Well, we're gonna give everyone just another minute, and then we'll get started here for our inaugural Phosphorus Live for the year 2025, which I can't believe is already here upon us.
Christmas will be here before you know it.
Yeah, for me, it's I got my 2.5-year-old, so her birthday in August will, I'm sure, be here before I blink. They say what is it, the days are long and never ending, but the years fly by like it's nothing. Uh,
Right.
I'm starting to feel that. She's going on 3, and I don't know where that time
Oh,
went.
wow.
She it's funny, I joined Phosphorus just after she was born, so her birthday and my time at Phosphorus are in sync. So
Oh,
it's however old she is how long I've been here. Yeah.
nice.
All right. I'd say we probably, excuse me, probably get started here and get going on our session. Just make sure we're all dialed in across the board for our different. We're kind of simulcasting across different mediums today, testing out some new platforms too. So I think that's pretty exciting. Some new exposure to new technology. All right. Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So, first off, hello and welcome to Phosphorus Live. This is our monthly look at the very interesting world of xIoT, or the extended Internet of Things. I am your host, James McCarthy, and I'll be joined by kind of a rotating cast of guests and guest hosts from both Phosphorus here internally at our organization, but also in the wider world of xIoT. So, we're going to bring people in from all different walks of life, but everyone that as it relates to the world of extended Internet of Things. So we're coming to you today from Zoo Webinar, but we're also going to welcome our friends on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. So we're kind of across the board, across different mediums. But regardless of where you're watching and how you've joined us today, if you have questions or anything any topic ideas or anything you want to contribute to the webinar, pop them into the chat. We'll address those as they come up. But for today, in our co-captain seat, we have Joel Goins, who leads the IoT slash OT security for a Fortune 500 company with over 1,200 sites across the globe. So Joel, welcome
Thank
to
you.
Phosphorus Live, and excited to talk today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, excellent. So our hope today was really to just talk through and understand your experience with kind of the world of xIoT and how you guys have tackled the kind of the ever-growing problem of managing and securing an infrastructure that has historically been really hard to work with. And not only how you do that at scale, but how you do it across, like I said, 1,200 plus locations. Seems like a pretty daunting task. So we have a bunch of questions I want to ask you, kind of interview style, but anything that you want to add to that or change or contribute, we're happy to digress as well. So
Quite a bit.
all right. That said, I want to get started with something simple. Get you an easy question here. So we know you're a bit of a device fanatic, right? Your career has been centralized in the IoT and OT space. So what would you say are the most interesting IoT or OT devices that you've come across? And if you could, kind of a two-part question, add something new. What's the one device type that you've been kind of eyeballing that you want to add to your repertoire as well?
There's a lot of new devices.
Oh, your audio cut out again there, Joel. Sorry.
Sorry, there's a lot of devices out there these days that are connected to the internet. They're talking to other things, and it's always surprising to see like, oh, I didn't know we had that. I see this, but I don't know what it is, right? So I got to go do homework on that and figure out, okay, what is this device and what's it doing and who owns it? So it's, I think one of the things that's really interesting here lately has been the people counters.
Mhm.
People counters, I've seen them in our environment. If you look around airports, you'll see them. They're using those to determine, do they need to add more TSA agents to, what's the queue like to get into through security and things like that. And they're standalone devices, which is what's really fascinating is that there's not a lot of software behind them, right? It's not a traditional camera with some AI software that's processing and doing the counting. It's all done on this device with the chipset. And to me, that's kind of, it's incredible that they can do that, right? It's not a laser scanner where you're walking through and it's just counting, coming in and going out. But it does it real time. But for things that what I find really interesting, and I'll be honest with you, I'd love to have in my lab anything back off. I mean, Beckhoff or Festo out of Germany. Beckhoff has these X-planar devices. They almost look like floating plates that can move, on this table. And now they've come out with this. It's a modular style robot, which is
Okay.
really cool. And it can go up to 7 axis. I haven't
Wow.
seen those yet in our environment, but I'm watching because if I find one, I'm going to go see it. But that would be cool to have in my lab. I would find a use for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. Yeah. So, especially seven axis for products. That's a lot of options come up with that.
Yeah, I think if I was still in my past life and was doing the manufacturing engineering and design, I would be looking for use cases inside the plant to go. Yeah, I think we need this.
It's sometimes you find the device and then eventually find the reason for having the device instead of the other way
Right.
around. Yeah, that's okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I know, you're like I said in the kind of the intro here, you're leading IoT and OT security for a Fortune 500 company. You guys have 1,200 locations worldwide, which is a massive scale.
Mhm.
So, what would you say are some of the biggest, obstacles or challenges that come with securing something not only at scale, but where the geographical footprint of that infrastructure is all over the world? Like, how do you manage that kind of an attack surface when all of the things are generally, kind of devices or IoT specific?
I'll be honest, when we first started down that path, that was a huge stressor for me. How am I going to do this, right? We put in phosphorus. It's got all these devices. How are we going to get our arms around it? And in conversation, what we found and what we ended up doing was actually pushing the responsibility down to the asset owners. And so giving them access to phosphorus instead of just two or three people in the security group sending out emails and going, hey, go fix this. We started onboarding the IT staff at those locations and giving them access. We use the tags inside Phosphorus to identify the location. And then, of course, we can then filter the location down to, an individual, person in IT. But at the end of the day, it's pushing it out there because I'm leveraging the resources that we already have in the environment across, all the different time spans. So when it gets down to, what are we doing inside security. So we're monitoring, we're doing a lot of training, a lot of support for those folks. Um, in fact, we did little clips, if you want to call them, 30-second clips that we provide on how to do this, right? It's a screen capture. And so if somebody says, how do I go and, enroll a device in PAM? There's a clip for that. We have a cheat sheet that we provided on for queries, right, to help those users get access. And like I said, we did training, right, in-depth training for hundreds of people to get into the platform and take over and really control their own destiny.
Okay, so a lot of teaching to fish instead of just giving them the data and saying,
Yep.
"Hey, go figure these problems out." It's I'm going to share the platform and share the tool we are actually going to use to not only understand the problem, but then try and go remediate that problem and manage the problem. So it
Right.
sounds like your goal was to try and get as many people using phosphorus as possible, as opposed to just keeping it kind of a man behind the curtain and telling
Mhm.
people what to do.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's busy, right? And so, everybody likes new tools as well. And, if you got have a location and it's got, 1,000 devices, and you don't have a tool to A, to see them for visibility, but to B, to go manage them, the time to go do all that on a one-on-one basis is incredible. Now we've given them the tool that they can not only see it, but they can go fix it in mass.
Yeah.
And they really seem to have latched onto that.
Yeah. I think I think the underlying tone there is the in mass part, right? It's the, if you're trying to solve this problem with a handful of, 10, 20, 15 devices, whatever, that's maybe not as important because you can go into those individual, manufacturers, use
Uh-huh.
their tool, do what you need to do, and then go on to the next one because the problem's smaller. But when you're talking about having 1,000 or 2,000 of these devices in your facility, even just one location that could be hundreds or thousands of man hours or
Right.
labor hours
Right.
to manage that problem. And so
Yep.
I think having phosphorus in there to help mitigate some of that time requirement
Mhm.
uh, can be huge. Well, awesome. So I think for me the big question that I really wanted to get to today, and the one that I think I want to spend the most time on, which is I kind of leads into this conversation here, which is solving the technological problem is one thing, right? Finding the platform, finding the vendor, the tool, whoever, like Phosphorus, that can go in there and do the things and execute your plan from a technology standpoint. That's kind of one problem. But I think the bigger, harder problem to tackle, and the one that's probably more expensive, is the people in the process, right? It's
Right.
it's how do we convert that platform into something meaningful that our teams can use and manage at scale. So if you could maybe just talk a little bit here about how you've navigated working across, so many different teams, because in the world of xIoT, I think it's unique because when you think about traditional IT, you have clearly defined roles, right? You have people who are in charge of the infrastructure, people who are in charge of the operating systems, patching. You've got these kind of defined roles that can manage the entirety of that infrastructure. Whereas with IoT and OT, it's a lot harder because you might have 5,000 different vendors
Mhm.
in your IoT footprint, and no one team owns any of that. So how have you managed to kind of navigate the difficulty of pushing out policy into an environment where you might have hundreds or even thousands of different individual owners or responsible owners for those things? Like how have you managed that process?
So one of the first things we did is we started having conversations internally with the field IT and bringing up Phosphorus and saying, "Hey, here's all the devices in your site." And real quick, we found out, "Hey, I don't own this device, right? This is not me. This is somebody at the group at the corporate level. This is the facilities group that owns these types of devices." And so we started going down that path is like, okay, what do you own? And, for a lot of IoT, it's, historically it's been a set it and forget it, right? So you install it, let's just take a printer, you install it, it works. Nobody calls you again until you get a paper jam or you run out of toner or it's time to replace it. Now it's a lot different. Right now, it's hey, we need to manage these devices because threat actors are getting creative and devices are becoming pivot points. So we have to manage it. But that's where we started is trying to determine who owns the devices. Is it the person on site, or is this a corporate function that owns it? The beauty of the Phosphorus platform is we are able to say, I'd say segregate those using the tags. So take a ILO or an iDRAC, right? So we have those now tagged with the site code, where the location is, but we also have it tagged with the support group that owns it. And it's typically not the local plant. So what it does is it gives, the support group for those types of devices, when they log in, they say, oh, okay, these are all the BMCs, right? I own these. The local guy or girl can still see it, but they can easily filter that out. So they can see, okay, let me get down to the devices that I actually own and am responsible for maintaining. As far as policy goes, we have policies, and most companies have policies that say, all devices must be managed, right? If it's on the network, it's got to be managed. But the policy, historically, for all companies, the IT side was really loose, right? Again, it goes back to it was that set it and forget it, and changing that mentality and telling the story around, take a multifunction copier, right? They all have hard drives in them. When you talk to people, they're like, I didn't know that. I'm like, well, yeah, it does. Um, it's got a hard drive, it scans, and you're scanning to PDF or you're scanning to email. That data just doesn't go into RAM. It goes into a hard drive, and it's kind of a first in, first out, when it fills up. That being said, if an attacker got in there, and think about, the scenario where, um, that MFC is sitting outside of legal or outside of HR, and they're scanning documents, and somebody got into there, it's a little scary. It really kind of wakes people up and going, oh, I didn't realize that. So yes, having default creds on an MFC is probably not a good idea,
Yeah.
right? And but it's not just educating the asset owners, um, letting them know, hey, we need to start managing these things. We need to take vulnerabilities seriously. We need to take default cred seriously. But it's the story, right? It's the story about the what ifs, and it's even better if you can go out and find a real live case where somebody used an IoT device to cause havoc, and it just really kind of hits home. They're like, yeah, I don't want to be called because somebody got into my MFC and downloaded, all the PDFs that were on there.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want anybody, let alone a malicious third party, to be able to get in and print all the last 100 documents that were printed to a printer or
Right.
sent to a printer. That feels like a pretty bad idea. So sometimes it's interesting. We always think about, and we've kind of historically talked about Phosphorus as this platform to help reduce the attack surface, because we don't want attackers to pivot, like you mentioned, off of these devices into other parts of the network. But
Right.
there's often times where the devices themselves have sensitive data. There's data on that thing that, when it's not managed, is just sitting there for anyone who knows how these things
Right.
work. They can just reach in and grab that data and walk out. And most of the time, these devices aren't part of a larger cybersecurity plan either. So they're not being monitored for outbound communication, or they're,
Right.
or they're not being monitored for PII, PHI. And so you may be leaking that data in a way that you didn't even know was
Well,
happening, right?
well, it's not just that too, but I would say probably, of IoT devices, they're probably idle 90% of the time. So that's
Yeah,
unused compute. And other tools, and most tools, well, they're usually running some version of Linux, right? And so you get root on there, you can install things. Most typical security tools aren't scanning for rootkits on things, or malware on IoT devices.
yeah,
So you wouldn't even know it was there until it was too late, and you start picking up odd traffic off of that device.
yeah,
And at that point, who knows, the damage is done.
yeah.
So you've got to secure them just, for that simple reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, they're all of these devices are running some flavor of Linux for the most part. I mean, there's
Mhm.
other versions of kind of soft or light OSs that could be running, but so many of them have BusyBox or some other kind of
Right.
Linux flavor sitting on top of there, and a lot of them will have processes or applications that are sitting idle that if
Mhm.
you looked at it from the outside, yeah, it doesn't run SSH, it doesn't run Telnet, but that's something that could be turned on if you just logged into it and gain access. You could just enable FTP, and now you have a point on a network that an attacker can upload files or upload data that you're not looking at, right? You're
Right.
completely invisible to it. So it's definitely there's elements of the IoT attack surface that I don't think a lot of organizations are thinking about in that way yet.
Mhm.
Um, and then when the big problem has been historically when they do start thinking about that problem, and they're an organization like yours where you've got this large size, you're
Right.
geographically dispersed, and you've got the problem, the scale of the problem becomes its
Mhm.
own thing. It's like how do you tackle that? How do you realistically manage that in a meaningful way? And the answer is not Excel documents, like I think it had been in the past, right?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've taken we've created some dashboards inside of Power BI. So, with the API calls, we're able to pull data, throw it in Power BI and provide that information to the masses, right? To the decision makers that want to see, okay, what is the state of the IoT in JCI, without them having to, have access to Phosphorus and go through the training. They can use Power BI and Pivot, right? Sites, geographic, type of devices. All that information is provided for them. And so we're seeing a lot of use there. People using that Power BI just to kind of get a state of the nation, if you will, the IoT nation. So that's really helpful. The other thing that is possible is connecting it to NAC. I think you guys integrate with Forescout. There's some pretty interesting features there that if you do integrate with Forescout, then the alerts get passed over, and you can inside Forescout, inside the NAC, you can write rules around phosphorus alerts. So NAC picks up a new printer, and that printer's got default creds. Theoretically, you could write a rule in Forescout that drops it into a secure environment, and with automation, emails the asset owner and says, "Hey, you need to go fix the creds on this. And once you do it, then we'll go put it, back on the cred VLAN, right? So it's accessible." That's just another layer, right, of protection that you can automate, and it kind of you don't have to worry about it as much, right?
Yeah.
We're always, scanning and going, oh, we got to go contact this guy and he's got to do this quickly. Um, it's all done behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, in all the best policy and procedure in the world's not going to help you if you're not auditing
Mhm.
the implementation of that policy and procedure,
Right.
right? So you can say, hey, all IoT needs to sit on this VLAN
Yep.
in our organization, and it needs to have customized credentials, and it needs
Mhm.
to have updated firmware, and you can make all of those rules as
Right.
an organization and all those policies. But if you aren't checking that, if you aren't constantly
Mhm.
analyzing your environment to see if those things are falling outside of those
Right.
criteria, then you don't really functionally have a policy. You have an idea, you have a
Yep.
suggestion, but you don't have actual policy framework. And I think that's where having the ability to actually go in and not only understand the environment and do
Mhm.
that assessment on a regular kind of ongoing basis, but then feeding that data through integrations to other platforms that can actually lock down the network or move that device from one VLAN to another. That's really powerful because you're now taking your policy and saying we're actually going to force this policy, and if
Mhm.
you fall outside of it, we're going to do something about it, right? It's
Right.
not just a recommendation. Yeah.
Right. Right. It takes yeah, we can't monitor that 24/7. No, nobody's going to staff up for that to watch for these things. I mean, that's almost a knock type event, that you have to watch for. But the ability to automate that, and then it's your reporting based on exceptions. Those emails go out and say, "Hey, go fix this," and then the automation goes and puts it where it needs to go. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So, we've only got a couple minutes here left
Sure.
on our webinar. Time flies pretty quickly on these things generally. That said, I do think uh, there's a lot we can really dive into, and I think this is a great kind of starting place for us, with you, Joel, here, to understand at a really high level kind of how you're leveraging phosphorus, but more importantly, I think how you're managing a global IoT or OT security program, where Phosphorus, not that we're not the end all be all solution for all things IoT and OT, but we enable and unlock a lot of the things that you're trying to do at a global level. And I think diving into that maybe over a couple more sessions in the future,
All
if
right. Sounds
you're
good.
would be awesome. But that's it. So that's a wrap for this month's Phosphorus Live. I want to make sure we get a moment here to check for any questions or anything that's coming in from other avenues as well. But if you want to get an invite on your calendar and emails about what we have coming up, today was just an example of some of the guests that we're going to have. We have more lined up as well. But head over to phosphorus.io /phosphorus -live. So you can follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and you'll catch the posts when we go live. We try to send out a pretty wide bat signal there. And if you have any suggestions on anything, specific topics or guest hosts, let us know. Drop a comment here on our socials, or send an email to webcast@phosphorus.io. But that's it. Joel, again, so much. Appreciate your time and taking time out of your schedule. Again, managing a global IoT and OT cybersecurity program. I can't even imagine how much time you have to spend doing that. I'm sure it's not a small project, but thank you for taking the time anyway.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's it, guys. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you next month.